there. I'd like to take some time to comment on the dialogue between Jonathan Pageau and Adam Friended. So I'm going to make 2 videos because I'm going to use a lot of clips and I want to comment on each clip. And every day that goes by is further away from the interview, so this is part 1 today. These clips are going to be in order, except for the first one. They're in the order of the conversation, so to some degree the topics get broken up, but because it's a conversation, there's a coherence to it. And the reason I'm doing this video is for 2 reasons. One of them is because, as anyone who's followed my channels noticed, that I'd like to apply what I'm learning about metaphysics of quality and Pirsig's work to other people's work, especially people who I follow in particular in this corner, but a variety of situations as well, and just general reflections on how metaphysics of quality manifests in my and in life in general. But what I really want to do is show how Pirsig can help someone like Adam, who is scientifically minded, understand someone like Jonathan. And I'm going to be using Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and Lila up to chapter 12 to try to do this. So there are some moral aspects of the metaphysics of quality. In fact, a big part of Lila is about the moral aspects of metaphysics of quality, but that happens after chapter 12, so we're not going to go too much into that. What I really want to do is show how Pirsig's work can explain the metaphysics of Jonathan's patterns in a way that someone who's scientifically minded can make the leap over to the other side. And I think that's what we're really seeing in this dialogue, is a disconnect. So let me begin at the end, how the dialogue ended up, because this is what we're going to try to help resolve.
It's been a fascinating we can talk again.
All right.
Hopefully,
but it's not giving me hope. That's for sure, man.
Really?
Oh yeah, because I'm realizing just how hard it is to communicate certain things to people who haven't had a certain intuition. Like, it's just really hard.
I know that you're making an impact on people, and people like your stuff, and there are people that understand it. I guess one of my things is I'm trying to bridge that gap. So many people see things that they don't understand, and they have just like a visceral disgust for it. Like they think that it's a threat to their identity or whatever it is. And I think that's just a bad way to look at the world. I think, I mean, yeah, obviously you're a smart guy. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. It's not like it's completely a mystery to me.
So Adam is obviously a very nice and open-minded fellow, very intelligent, but he just can't really understand what Jonathan's talking about. Now in this video, again, the main thing I want to do is show how Pirsig can help someone like Adam. Because the metaphysics of quality is a bridge between science and religion. Pirsig has stated this several times in both Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and up to chapter 12 in Lila. So what does that mean to us? It means that you have to understand a value-based metaphysics. His metaphysics is value-based, it's not substance-based. And I'm going to recommend, for someone like Adam, I might start with Lila just because it's the theory kind of laid out, but you really need to read both books. And I recommend Lila because Pirsig talks us through the understanding of his theory in such a rational way that with enough concentration, any intelligent rationalist should be able to at least understand it, and it's going to open up one's mind to how value can be the source of everything rather than atoms, let's just say.
Well, for sure. I do feel like I wasn't able to communicate what I wanted. These things are hard to talk about. And so I feel like I wasn't able to communicate one basic thing, which is that I could maybe summarize it this way, which is that I have a cosmological frame. Mm-hmm. And this cosmological frame is actually universal. It actually isn't limited to Christianity. Christianity has some key puzzle elements to that cosmological frame, which I think are extremely important. I would say make Christianity truer than anything else. But the frame itself is the same in Taoism and in Hinduism and in all the religions. Like, it's a basic cosmological frame, and the applications of that pattern are what cause all the rules in terms of morality that I believe in.
The cosmological frame that Jonathan talks about and that is mirrored in the other religions, Taoism being the one that we're most interested in here, due to the reference early in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, is parallel to the frame of Pirsig's metaphysics. As I've said before, Pirsig's metaphysics is a precursor toward the frame that Jonathan describes, because Pirsig's metaphysics describes the force that results in the constituent actions and elements of this cosmological frame, at least in my opinion. And the application of the metaphysics of quality to the frame is what drives it. So behind and we're going to refer to this pattern as the language of creation, which is the name of the book that Jonathan Pageau wrote, which, by the way, is another a book that rationalists should read if they want to understand this, because Matthew is a mathematician, so he bridges the gap.
Like, I have a whole pattern that tells me a pattern that is as useful to my moral positions than they are to how I build houses and how you build cities and how you organize government. All of these things come down from this cosmological pattern. There's variety. It's not a totalitarian thing. There's variety. So if you're going to tell me that this moral position of Christianity is wrong, then you have to be able to argue your frame to me, not just this position. And you also have to be able to tell me what is the good you're aiming towards, because I know what the good I'm aiming towards is. Whether I succeed or not, we can argue about the application.
What the rationalists have, or the materialists have, a difficult time in understanding is that the good we are aiming, it's the good that we're aiming toward. And that good is something that we all know intuitively, even if we don't execute it properly, or even if we miss the mark or go off the quality track. There's lots of reasons that can happen. But the good itself is so essential to what the universe is. There's really no question about it. And in that experiment in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance in the classroom, Pirsig demonstrated that we have an intuitive understanding of what quality is, of what the good is. Now, obviously, like I said, there's going to be things that get in the way of your understanding, but in general, because remember, there's a couple students who didn't think that the highest quality essay was the highest quality essay for whatever reason. It might be psychological reasons, who knows, it might be any number of things. But in general, you're talking about an ability to connect with quality and knowing what it is. Because quality creates the universe, there is not any standing outside of it. Quality itself, the good in Pirsig's philosophy, is the first principle. It creates everything, and there's no way to stand outside of everything.
The frame is so powerful that I'm willing to even accept some things that I might disagree on in detail, because it's worth to keep this frame and to live inside this story and to participate in these communities. It's worth it to accept a few things that I might even disagree.
In my opinion, Jonathan's frame is a pattern of the manifestation of quality. It is Christianity, which is one of the highest quality social patterns of value that has ever existed. It's a way of keeping one on that track of quality that is constantly referring back to that pinnacle of quality, the good, and assessing whether or not there is a direct line between where one is going and where one came from.
Like, I've hung out with these people enough, and I'm sort of tacitly part of their tribe. I think they would say something to the effect of truth, scientific truth, materialist truth has a higher survival value, just because they always want to point to medical advancements and things like that. Putting all of our eggs in the metaphorical truth basket would be more detrimental to the survival of more people than to focus on scientific truth. So I think that is really their biggest disagreement or argument against your ethical package that I think that they would pull out.
So it looks like what Adam is saying is that the survival of most people is what the materialists, in this case, the evolutionists, Adam's looking at this through a evolutionary framework, proclaim to be the highest good. And I guess that would be the longest possible time spent on the planet Earth, or maybe on the planet Mars in a few years, for the material entity of the body. How long does the body stay alive? That is the highest good. This clip also places Adam in the scientific materialist camp. He's someone who thinks that the cultural idea of Christianity, the social idea, is a good thing, but he sees it as a valuable concept, not because it celebrates the highest good, but because of evolutionary reasons. It kept people on the planet alive longer. I guess in evolution, the key is live longer and reproduce, but we're just going to talk about living longer for the time being, because that's kind of what he implied. So for a scientist, that's not bad at all, but it is still steadfastly, his point of view is really steadfastly immersed in a subject-object metaphysics. This evolutionary science has at its core an objectivity. And this is sort of the same problem, not problem, but objectivity isn't value-based. It's based in substance. It's based in the notion that there is a smallest particle somewhere, and someday we're going to find it, basically. And that is the origin of everything. Whereas in the metaphysics of quality, the origin of everything is value, is quality, is good.
So this is something that has come up with Brett Weinstein as well, which is, so on the one hand, you have this evolutionary thinking, mm-hmm. and this like basic scientific thinking, which is also bound up in evolutionary thinking. And these two things are strangely bound up together. And so what I hear is, on the one hand, I hear people saying that scientific truth is the highest, it's the most important. And then I hear at the same time, the same people saying we need to break our evolutionary code. We need to move out of our evolutionary code because it's dangerous, because it leads to genocide, because it leads to rape, because it leads to all of these horrible tribalistic things. And so they're saying we need to be able to now transcend our evolutionary impulses. And my question is, again, towards what? Like, where are you standing? Like, if you're not then in the evolutionary camp and you're in another camp, then tell me what's your camp. Well, like, tell me where you are and what you're aiming towards.
So here Jonathan is demonstrating that scientific truth is only partially true. It's a useful tool, but as we know from when Pirsig was talking about an updated rationality, a spiritual rationality in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, your orientation needs to be towards value, towards what's better as broad, encompassing generality, and that's not always what's most expedient or most factual. What is true, what is, according to Jonathan and to Pirsig, what is true, what is hamartia, is what's best. Not what's best for the longest physical existence or well-being or whatever the rationalists try to substitute as the highest value. It is what's best overall, and that is staying on this track where you're connected directly with the source of everything, and that might manifest itself very differently in different experiences. There isn't a solid, truth that we're going to find, and there it is, there's the particle. This is a dynamic truth that has to reorient itself as it strays from the mark. Hamartia is the mark, and what this truth is pushing, is dynamically transforming things back towards the aim. The aim is true. That's a perfect phrase for that.
Believe is a tough term. I think that's a term we're getting hung up on. You think you accept that it's true that evolution is happening, evolution by natural selection.
Yeah, I'll say yes. That's fine.
What is it?
I can say yes. That's okay.
Pageau is lukewarm about evolution. And it's one of the theories that most of us in the subject-object world, or most people in the subject-object world, believe completely, except for, of course, religious fundamentalists. And so why is he so lukewarm about it? Is he a fundamentalist? No, I don't think he is.
Evolution is the best argument that religion is doing something useful evolutionarily, or why would it exist? We're expending all of these costly energies, going to church, helping people, meeting other, meeting together, forming coalitions, all of that stuff has to be evolutionarily advantageous somehow or other.
Also because as religion leaves the public sphere, then the birth rate goes down. So
sure, exactly, that too.
So this clip explains Adam's worldview, and it appears to be a very compelling worldview towards him, this evolutionary materialistic worldview. Jonathan reveals his value-based metaphysics here because he knows that while evolution is a high-quality intellectual pattern of value, it's a theory. It's only intellectual, and it only explains one level. Remember that all levels operate at the same time in any situation, and they are all created by and contain value. Let's go over them: inorganic, biological, social, and intellectual. And in the metaphysics of quality, all four levels are equally real. They're all part. They explain. You can explain all of our experience with these four levels. They're inclusive, but they operate at the same time in any given situation, and they operate independently, although they support, like a lower level supports a higher level. A higher level can't exist without this lower level supporting it. And they are all created by, and they all contain value. They contain quality, and quality is the base reality of a value-centered metaphysics. Science is a tool of value.
The frame that I'm trying to explain to people makes sense of it all. Like it doesn't, none of it falls to the side. There's nothing in scripture which falls to the side if you use the basic cosmic pattern that you find in religion itself.
So where have we heard this before, that nothing is left out? Well, in the metaphysics of quality, and Lila Pirsig has stated that several times now. So the language of creation, is that the same metaphysics as the metaphysics of quality? Not exactly. They sort of are related to each other like kind of like the levels. The language of creation is supported by something like the metaphysics of quality. The metaphysics of quality is a meta pattern. It is the process of value itself that yields the first separation in John's metaphysics, which is the separation between heaven and earth. It's more like Tao in that it is the force that creates that separation, which means dynamic and static. Although, and heaven and earth is a metaphorical illustration of the dynamic-static separation. Static and dynamic are not metaphors. That is a description of the underlying force that causes this separation, that causes the beginning of the language of creation. And they are the process that creates the first metaphor, which is heaven and earth, that is gleaned from the entire history of consciousness of observing and experiencing life. Okay,
I'm not completely sure what you're meaning on the cosmic pattern, but we'll get back to it because I want you
It would have been useful for Adam to look at Matthew's book at this point, because you don't have to read the whole thing just to kind of see what's going on, just to see these patterns. I don't blame anyone for going into an interview without reading the other fellow's book, because sometimes a very interesting discussion can emerge if the person knows nothing about the other person's stuff. I mean, generally someone will know something about it. But in this case, we're looking to try to bridge this gap, and that's why actually looking at Matthew's book is a good idea before talking to Jonathan.
Like if I have 100 people versus 10 people, obviously you'd put your money on the 100 people, right?
Well, not always. I don't think that's why.
I know, obviously.
No, that's why you have moments in history where the small, like, Mongolian tribe comes in and savages the Chinese empire.
Why though? Why? What is the advantage that they have over the numbers?
Well,
a technological
because
advantage,
they have
or
more flexibility.
okay, so they have a better ethical system.
Sorry?
So they have a better ethical system, a better strategy. Like
they
if
have
we thought of it,
they have a better system to dominate, because when you have, let's say you have a system which is too big, then it lacks flexibility. And so the bigger it gets, the more chance you have of a small thing coming in and piercing the bubble, right? And because it has massive flexibility, then it can wiggle itself into a space and take over.
But if you have two teams like that and one has a superior, I call it an ethical system because that's basically what ethical systems are. They're the rules of engagement between a group. So if that group has a ethical system that allows them to form a bond of 10 guys that can beat 100 guys, that ethical system, everyone's going to look at and go, that's a good ethical system. I think we should adopt it. And pretty soon that 10 guys is 100 guys, and they can beat 1,000 people, right?
Yeah, but
so
once
that ethical
they get to
system,
1,000, then there's another 10 guys
with it.
Here we are talking about the destruction of a too rigid, static social pattern, the empire, the Chinese empire, a cultural immune system by a smaller but flexible and dynamic, close-knit group of renegades. And this pattern is repeated all the way up from inorganic. This is how a static pattern is killed or transformed. It's not a better ethical system. What we're seeing here is more flexibility. It's flexibility first. The flexibility of this small tribe is more important than anything else because they're bringing in dynamic qualities. So you note the flexibility of the situation first, and then later you can analyze why the Chinese empire is rigid and why the band of renegades is flexible. Size is part of it. This is the cultural immune system, this Chinese empire, which is the same as the biological immune system, which is the same as biblical stories like David and Goliath. The pattern is everywhere. It's a tenet of the metaphysics of quality. And here Jonathan is identifying the pattern, and Adam is trying to analyze these elements of the situation. That might be useful in science, but it's not the pattern we're talking about. And we kind of don't even care about the specifics, why it's flexible, why it's rigid. We just are seeing the flexibility, the rigidity being transformed, demolished and or transformed by the dynamism.
Your goal, what are you trying to accomplish with your YouTube channel and your just talking about this kind of stuff?
So what I'm noticing in the world is a breakdown. There's a breakdown happening. There's a fragmentation of identities. There's a fragmentation of all the places in which we find our communion, or in which we find unity, are breaking down. And people are just surfing as if this is normal. But at some point, it's going to move towards more chaos, riots, all of this stuff. The chaos that we saw in 2020, and it's also going to move towards authoritarian clampdowns, because one of the problems which happens when normal identity starts to fragment is that there's an overcompensation on the other side.
I'm just going to read a little bit from the first chapter of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. There are eras of human history in which channels of thought have been too deeply cut and no change was possible and nothing new ever happened and best was a matter of dogma. But that is not the situation now. Now the stream of our common consciousness seems to be obliterating its own banks, losing its central direction and purpose, flooding the lowlands, disconnecting and isolating the highlands, and to no particular purpose other than the wasteful fulfillment of its own internal momentum. You'll see the concept of the cultural immune system reflected in that quote. And there are not many parts. Really, the metaphysics of quality does not contain too many elements. The same way the basic pattern of language of creation is very straightforward. It doesn't contain that many elements.
And if we attack ritual and we attack the notion of concentric spaces or the idea of the way in which society communes, then it's going to become the suburbs. All of reality is going to become the suburbs. It's going to become a flat distribution of particles that have no coherence. It's going to happen in the way we build houses. It's going to happen in our morality, where everybody has their own morality. It's going to happen in our identities, where everybody has their own identity, and there's nothing joining us together.
And again, the same concept.
Well, I'm torn over whether or not the fragmentation is due to material conditions or whether it's due to philosophical breakdown. I think there's good arguments for both.
Everything originates with quality. Quality analogs mirror the quality event of conception. So we're talking about that pre-intellectual awareness of quality that gives the valuation, and then an analog is created to mirror that event of valuation. The fragmentation is due to the inability of a substance-based metaphysics to deal with all the information the internet gives us. We need to make value primary to determine which bits of information reflect the quality source and which are unmoored because they've lost touch with the source for any number of reasons. They've lost touch with the source, usually financially driven or ego driven these days. But whatever the case, there are bits of information that connect with the quality source, and there are bits of information that don't. The analysis and categorization that is now our primary way of evaluation needs to become secondary in the service of quality. It's like the master and the emissary, you could say. Quality needs to be the master, value needs to be the master, and rationality the emissary.
What would be the central idea that Christianity rolls around? I have my idea, but my idea is through an evolutionary framework, obviously. So, but your idea and everything that you're saying, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I'm kind of translating it into an evolutionary framework in my mind.
Yeah.
That
I think it's love.
Love.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what love does is that it is the balance of the unity and multiplicity.
Mm-hmm.
So love is when you can have, let's say, unity amongst people, mm-hmm. but that unity doesn't dissolve the difference, the multiplicity.
So if we're talking about the problem we just addressed, when you have something that is not created with love, it is not a quality analog. Remember, everything is an analog of the moment that quality is perceived. What is better? So subatomic forces will love carbon molecules because they are vehicles towards freedom. And an artist will love how he perceives the beauty of a tree and attempt to recreate that love through a quality painting. Pirsig has also used the word care to illustrate how a mechanic attends to his motorcycle. He loves it, he cares about it and maintains it beautifully. Or he gets possessed by something like his ego, thinks he knows everything about the motorcycle when he does it, or boredom, he gets sick of working on it, instead of love, instead of quality. And then the motorcycle maintenance may be subpar. It may fail. It may not have hamartia. It may not connect with quality. You see the pattern? Both approaches are reflected in how the motorcycle runs. So Christianity uses the love of God to guide a Christian on the quality track.
The theory of evolution. So that's like
pattern. Okay,
yeah,
you have a pattern,
right? And selection, variation, reproduction.
It doesn't matter which one it is.
Okay.
Any scientific theory will do.
Jonathan is trying to show how the pattern of hierarchy of the highest good of quality is what drives any segment of any phenomenon or any action, whether it's science or taking care of a motorcycle. This hierarchy, this hierarchical way of understanding things, it's ingrained, and it's ingrained on every level.
And that is a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that what that pattern does is, first of all, it tells you what to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could look at a million things in the world.
Sure, totally.
So the theory, first of all, frames what you're talking about.
A little slice of reality.
It frames the slice,
mm-hmm.
and then it also gives you the parameters by which the pattern of this thing is going to happen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the heaven of that scientific thing. And then there's also a earth, a lower part, and that's all the multiplicity of facts which you encounter, all the variety of facts
that the pattern creates in sort of a fractile type sense.
Yeah, but it doesn't just create them. It also kind of, let's say it has to recognize them also. Right. It's not just about creating them, because those facts, you know, have a way of speaking. Like they you know, and sometimes the facts will start to contradict the theory. And so then you have to find a way to balance the theory with the facts.
Correct.
If it's not balanced, then either the theory will like start to crush the facts and will start to suppress the facts that it doesn't like, so that it will continue to make the theory look plausible. So it'll start to marginalize facts.
This is where the metaphorical truth comes in right here.
This is like not metaphorical. This is what happens, right?
And here they're talking about a scientific experiment where their hypothesis just isn't working, so they need a new one. If you don't update that by being guided by quality, by allowing what's best, you're trying to preserve something preconceived. And preconceived notion is a hell of a value trap. See, chapter 26 is in The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. You can end up with a very low quality situation which your endeavor veers off the track of quality and just goes somewhere else. And then you're trying to preserve it with something else besides quality.
Well, definitely, yeah. If
it's not metaphorical, it's like, if this is scientific. So you have facts and you're looking at them through your theory, but some of them don't fit. If a few of them don't fit, that's fine. Right? You kind of leave them to the side.
Yeah.
But if a lot of them, then you start to push them, at some point,
the theory's overturned.
It's going to split apart. And the theory and the facts won't fit together anymore.
Correct. Yes.
Reality will stop to be coherent.
Well, what they do in science, though, is they throw the theory away. They say,
that's right.
okay, we need a new theory.
Yeah, you need a theory which is more...
explains these facts better, these new facts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so but when the theory and the facts are together, and there's a balance between the unitive capacity that the theory offers and the variation at the bottom, that's love.
See, and then you go to something that's completely subjective.
Love is not subjective. How is love subjective?
Love is not subjective. Love happens. It happens pre-intellectually. The quality event is a relationship between the perceived and the perceiver. Love just happens. Poincaré said that there are many facts that can potentially unite any given theory or solve any problem. However, the best facts will emerge in the moment. And there's a quote from Zen in The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance I often use, so I'm going to use it here. The subliminal self, Poincaré said, looks at a large number of solutions to a problem, but only the interesting ones break into the domain of consciousness. Mathematical solutions are selected by the subliminal self on the basis of mathematical beauty, of the harmony of numbers and forms, of geometric elegance. This is a true aesthetic feeling which all mathematicians know, Poincaré said. It is this harmony, this beauty, that is at the center of it all. Now, what is that harmony? What is that beauty? What is that aesthetic feeling? It's love. And that love, this quality, is what coheres static patterns of value. So that value is created by and contains fractally. It's no different in a scientific or mathematical theory that works to improve things in the world, or in a faith or religion that does the same, that coheres a group of individuals under one entity. Again, this is the same thing where you're cutting things off from the quality source, and by not allowing it to update, because in order to stay connected to the quality source, you're going to have to be updating because things evolve. And the point is staying connected to the quality source. So if you don't let things in to allow that to happen, to allow things to transform and update in a dynamic way, you will close yourself off from love. And love isn't going to live there anymore in your cultural immune system.
So love your enemy doesn't mean he's not your enemy. Right? It's not saying this person's not your enemy. It's saying this person is your enemy. But you have to find it in yourself, and you could still defend yourself, actually. Like in terms of Christian understanding, in terms of a country, like no Christian country would ever say you need to let yourself get invaded by other countries. but the idea is you need to also be able to continue to see the humanity of even the person that's attacking you, and to see that they share something in common with you, even though they are your enemy.
Yeah.
And so those are the kinds of answers that Christianity gives, which are based on this finding a balance between the unity and multiplicity, like this finding this space where you have the best relationship between, the tribal aspect and also this openness towards the outside.
So we saw in chapter 11 of Lila that static patterns stabilize and defend, and dynamic quality creates and updates. If you were to close your gates to anything new, you create that immune system that forbids any dynamism. What you're trying to do is prevent any potential pathogen from entering the system because you want to preserve it. If you're too rigid about that, this leads ultimately to degeneration, and these systems become low-quality systems that can't sustain. They are too rigid. By loving your enemy, you both admit he's the enemy and you keep him at a distance, but you also keep yourself open to the possibility that this enemy has something to offer. Your system has a center. In the language of creation, there's a center, and the periphery is unknown. But within the periphery, and the periphery is the enemy, but within the periphery, if things aren't working in the center anymore, if they don't cohere anymore with the highest good, then the enemy comes in and adds what is missing and updates things. Because sometimes the enemy wants to be brought in and integrated. Sometimes the enemy sees what's lacking and comes in, and it's a dynamic process. Now, of course, it might not be good for you in the short term, but in the long term, this dynamic process is the nature of evolution. It's the nature, and in this particular case, it's the nature of shadow in Jungian psychology. If you don't integrate shadow, it will perpetually attack you. At some point, the integration will improve the whole situation. So that's why you have to love your enemy. Is you're all constituents in this experience, and at some time, the enemy may be exactly what you need to maintain the connection with God.
It's like social justice can be conceptualized
well,
as a
everything
religion.
can become a religion.
Yeah.
Money can become that's why we have the idea of idolatry in Christianity.
Money
Yeah,
necessarily.
we could understand that the god of our system is money, like or mammon, and the god of the communist system is this weird equality thing. And so it's like they worship equality, and so and then they want to make the world in the image of equality.
So Jonathan is right. Money is our religion, and what we're seeing now is the problem when what is at the top of the hierarchy is a rational pattern, not the greatest good, or is something else besides the greatest good. And this ultimately results in fragmentation, which results in degeneration. The good quality is eternal. Its manifestation is dynamic, but there is always a good there. Only the highest good can be at the top if you want things to progress and cohere, rather than degenerate. It's interesting. If you're talking about evolution, you absolutely see this in the evolutionary process. Things progress and cohere, and then a lot of things degenerate. So we human beings, somehow, quality has kept us alive for all these years, for 3.5 billion years. So there is a quality strand from the Big Bang to us. What's behind the Big Bang? We'll talk about that in the next video. So Pageau's Orthodox Christianity is a very high quality form of Christianity because it's an analog of these eternal patterns. You can't just have a metaphysics, you have to live in the world. And while Pirsig's metaphysics, in my opinion, are the metaphysics of reality, as close as we can get, and they are the most inclusive, there isn't necessarily a practice there. Pirsig gives us hints and examples as to how to live this way, but what you have to do with Pirsig's metaphysics of quality is you have to integrate the sensibility of it. Same with the language of creation. If you integrate the sensibility, then you have a much better chance of finding the best analog and the best way to live, find the best analogs, to create the best analogs, to live your life in the best possible way. Pageau has found it in Orthodox Christianity, and of course there might be other ways. Maybe Zen Buddhism is another way. Perhaps there are secular alternatives. I don't know. That's a whole nother thing. Let's go back to chapter 1 of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I would not like to cut any new channels of consciousness, but simply dig deeper into old ones that have become silted in with the debris of thoughts grown stale and platitudes too often repeated. What's new is an interesting and broadening eternal question, but one which, if pursued exclusively, results only in an endless parade of trivia and fashion, the silt of tomorrow. I would like instead to be concerned with the question, what is best, a question which cuts deeply rather than broadly, a question whose answers tend to move the silt downstream. Right there, he's not only describing our modern problem of fragmentation, he is saying pull yourself out of a rational categorization mindset and adopt a value-based approach. Now, one thing I want to say is that both Pirsig's metaphysics of quality and the language of creation are rational descriptions of a value-based metaphysics. This makes them both a great bridge into this alternative way of understanding reality. And to shift from a materialist understanding to a value-based understanding is what we want in order to make sense of the totality of being, especially now, when things are really falling apart, when they're really fragmented, when they're really shallow. The problem is we're making sense of the totality of being within the parameters set by scientific understanding that has only populated our brains for 400 years. With a shift in metaphysics, understanding the world on the level of substance becomes a valuable tool. But that is only a tool. Science really just needs it to be a tool in this much greater, more inclusive way of understanding the whole thing. And that is understanding it in terms of value. This half of the interview dealt more with basic metaphysics of the patterns, and the next part deals with the pattern applied more, as well as science, truth, and God. So I will continue with the rest of the video. Hopefully I'll get it out this weekend. And more on how metaphysics of quality can bridge the science-religion disconnect. So I hope that made sense, and I will see you next time.